active versus passive voice. ACT is typically going to focus on the active. The only time passive is going to be the option is this. Every other choice has something grammatically wrong with it. Okay, so if I'm looking at this, an active voice preserves the performer of the action. So it says, Beatrice prepared the fine meal. Okay, so it's saying who did it. Passive voice is talking about a receiver. So the fine meal was prepared by Beatrice. Are both of these sentences correct? Yes. ACT typically goes with the first one. It goes along with their being concise and to the point. So you're going to see that first one more often. If both choices are presented, you want to go with the active voice there. All right. Misused modifiers. So that was something that came up on that practice we were doing. So modifiers are a describing phrase that we might see like at the beginning of a sentence. As a child is a modifier here. As a child, my father took me to the playground most days. What is wrong with that, or what's confusing about that? We know what it's trying to say, right? It's like a kid or somebody's talking about their parent. But if you read it, as a child, my father, it almost makes it sound like the father was a child. So you have to be careful of those phrases that aren't clear. Another one, wanting to prevent them from profiting from her music. New versions of Swift's earlier albums. Oops, I have a typo there anyway. So when I'm looking at this, it starts off wanting to prevent them from profiting from her music. We don't even know who them is here. Okay, so it's not clear when it's put at the beginning of our sentence like that. So we might need to work on wording on those types of questions to clarify it a bit. I want you guys to take a look at this question and see if you can pick the right answer. Staying up late working. The report was finished by me in the early hours of the morning. Okay, so this sounds weird, the way it's written. We have this phrase, staying up late and working, but we don't even talk about who was staying up until later in the sentence. So if I need to reword this, definitely not good the way it's written. The early hours of the morning is when I finished the report. Does that make it any clearer? So staying up late working. Who stayed up late working? I finished the report in the early hours of the morning. Is that better? You want your modifiers to be close to what they're modifying. Okay, I'm staying up late working needs to be close to the noun it's describing, which is the I. Staying up late working, my report was finished in the early hours of the morning. Again, that one's just not phrased very clearly. It's a little awkward. So H is the best option here, because you were the one that stayed up late. So a couple other things we're going to mention. Pronouns just take place of a noun. It can be used to make our writing more concise. We've done some of these before. I want you to look at the next two questions and answer those. All right. So the first one, have you ever had a day when you wished you could have just stayed in bed? So is that correct as written? You could of, one could of, or one could have. First question, is it could have or could of? Should have, could have, would have, or should have, could have, would have. It's always have. Okay, so it's never of. So we can mark off those. All right. Then, is it better to say you could have or one could have? Keep in mind we're talking about you, so would I switch to one in the middle? No. So this one is no change. The taxi driver who finally picked up my boss and I wouldn't take credit cards. All right, so looking at this, no change. The difference is, do we want who, whom, and which? And if we decide on who, we have to also decide I or me. So, who, whom, or which? What do we think? Who. Okay, why? Okay, so you're saying who, so that narrows it down to those two. So then would you say my boss and I, or my boss and me? So remember, we use I if it's a subject, me if it's an object. What's the subject in this sentence? Taxi driver, that's our subject. So this would have to be the object, so I need to use me there. So the correct answer is H. The taxi driver who finally picked up my boss and me wouldn't take credit cards. All right. So, deciding who versus whom. Who is the subject? Whom is the object? When I looked at this, taxi driver was my subject, and that's who I was talking about. So that's why we go with whom. If you see who and whom, here's a tip. Try replacing them with he and his. So for instance, he called me or who called me. If he called me makes sense, he is the subject, so who is the subject? It would replace it. If you say I called him, we're going to go with whom called him. So if I look at this, my boss, whom were already upset with me, pulled out some money from his wallet. What's the subject of this sentence? Boss. So is whom describing the subject or the object here? It's going with the subject. So that means I have to go with who. Do I have more than one boss? No. So who was? My boss was. Okay. You guys have to tell me the difference between these words. What are so whose versus whose? What's the difference?
Whose with an apostrophe, who is?
Yes. When it has an apostrophe, that's who is. Remember contractions, if you're putting two words together. So then we can see whose here is showing possession or asking a question, whose book is this? But this is saying who is the owner of this book. What about its versus its?
It is.
Yeah. With the apostrophe, that's our it is. So apostrophes, we did some examples yesterday and what we talked about at the beginning of class this morning, showing possession. They can also show contractions. So we're going to do two final examples and then I will be done for today. All right, so try the next two questions. So I watched in dismay as my laptop was crushed beneath the taxi's wheels. All right. So looking at this, what did we choose? J. Did anyone choose something differently? Okay. So the wheels belong to the taxi. Does it have more than one wheel? Yes. So it has to have the S on it, but the wheels don't own anything. The taxi owns the wheel. Is there more than one taxi? No. So it should be taxi apostrophe S. So taxi's wheels. Its screen was smashed to pieces. What do we think? D. So there, Was there more than one? Nope, so we can't do that, that's plural. This means it is, which doesn't make sense. ITS apostrophe doesn't make sense. It's trying to show possession, but that's not how we use the word it's. So the correct answer here is D. All right.